Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful conference here. So, to introduce myself, I'm Nandini Agarwal, and I'm a software engineer at Dell EMC Dojo team in Bangalore. During my 4 years of industry experience, I have mostly worked with open source cloud technologies, cloud native applications, and microservices. And in today's talk, I'll share some of my experiences from these.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Malini Bhattacharjee. Thank you all for being here. There are so many wonderful sessions going on, right? It's very hard to choose which one to attend. So thanks for being here. So I'm a product manager with Dell EMC Dojo team. Our team is part of the Technology Research and Innovation Group, or the Trigger Group within Dell EMC. Our team is tasked with helping other teams in their digital transformation journey. And currently, we are partnering with Dell's e-commerce platform to modernize and transform that e-commerce platform to grow into like a highly resilient, omni-channel and global platform. It has been a wonderful learning experience so far, and Nandini and I are here to talk about some of our experiences and our learnings, and we hope some of that would be helpful for you who might be undertaking a similar journey.
So, today to start with, we'll be talking about our journey, basically what led us to transformation and how we laid our foundation. After that, we'll double click on the technology aspect of things and see how Spring and PCF have played an important role in our transformation story. Post that, we'll also share some of our lessons and tips we learned on our way using these technologies and might be helpful for you as well. We'll take the questions at the end of the session, and we'll also be available outside in the Bay Area for an extended Q&A. So, to get started, Malini, would you like to share with the group why and what transformation we went with and how are we achieving it?
Sure. Okay, so who here likes fast cars? Awesome. So the speed at which everything is moving around us, right, and the speed at which the world is evolving, I don't think speed is an option anymore. I don't think we have an option to actually like it slow and be relaxed and not really move at jet speed. To make things even more interesting, I think what lies ahead of us is very different from what we see in the rearview mirror. So all our experiences that we've had so far, especially for people who've been in the industry for a while, right? So all our experiences in the past, they're not enough to shape our decisions for the future. So, I mean, what I meant here is changing things, the way you're doing things, the decisions that you make, the kind of input that you use to make decisions, all of these things are changing at jet speed, which means transformation is kind of imperative. But is it easy? Well, I don't think so. Now, earlier this year, we had a workshop with our senior leadership in Trigger, and it reminds me of a very interesting exercise that we did there. So Ken Durazzo, our Trigger leader, made us all pick up a marker, go to a whiteboard, and write our name with our dominant hand. Needless to say, we were all at our best handwriting. So we sat down pretty satisfied, and then Ken smiled. So we knew something tough was coming our way. So he said, pick up that same marker, go to that same whiteboard, but now write your name with your non-dominant hand. So what do you think happened? So what took us 2 seconds earlier now took us about a minute, and the results were far from optimal. This simple exercise taught us that something as innocuous as writing your own name can become supremely difficult when you're doing it in a way that you're just not used to. So you might think, if writing your own name in a different way was so difficult, why did we even undertake this mammoth task of transforming Dell's e-commerce platform, right? Well, simply because we had no choice. There was some research that was done for our market base and the user base, and some very interesting numbers came up, as you can see on this slide. So for samplers, more than 60% of our customers now preferred using some sort of a self-serving commerce platform rather than actually going through a salesperson. Mobile e-commerce was growing leaps and bounds, and by 2020, it's expected to capture about 45% of the US e-commerce market. These numbers and more kind of pointed us towards a North Star, so to speak. And we knew that we had to quickly build a commerce platform that would cater to all the needs of the future very quickly. Now, this was basically how we came to this conclusion that we had to transform. Now that we had done that, so how did we even go about it? So the Dell Digital Way, which embodies the essence of our process and the culture that we use to do this, rests on 3 very strong pillars. And this has been like a recurring theme in most of the transformation stories that we've heard in this conference so far. But yeah, it's kind of reassuring that we're all doing it in a similar way, and we're kind of finding the balance that works for our company, right? The first pillar that I would like to talk about is the balance team. So when I first joined Delhi MC Dojo, the concept of the small balance team was introduced to me using Jeff Bezos' now very famous term, the two-pizza team. So while that kind of gave me a very good idea of the ideal size of the team, I think there's more to it. So the cross-functional aspect of a team and the sense of ownership that each team has, right? That comes from the fact that each such balance team has a dedicated product manager, a dedicated product designer, and 2 to 4 pairs of developers depending on the size of the use case that you're solving. Now, for people who were in Vaughn's session earlier today, you would have heard about microservices using a bounded context and the importance of that bounded context remaining within the team that was building it. So that was like an aha moment for us because that's exactly what we do. So each of these balance teams, they create their services as a product in itself and not as a feature in the larger product. So that basically means that the team is accountable for each of the decisions that you make as part of building that product, and you're totally accountable and responsible for those decisions. Our process is based on the key metric of delivering value to our customers constantly and consistently. So all that we do basically makes sure that we stay true to this KPI. How do we make sure that quality is always on point? We use industry best practices like pair programming, test-driven design from day one. Our highly automated CI/CD pipeline makes sure that our release cycles are fast and autonomous and not really manual at any given point of time. And it makes sure that we get in customer feedback as quickly as possible and use it to make the further product decisions. We do continuous discovery. So that is a constant theme in each of the services. So while there is one service being built, we're always thinking of what's next. And this is a continuous discovery in conjunction with our customers. Now, the third pillar is the technology. This is where Nandini will double click. But what I would like to highlight is that the advantage of being in Dell Technologies that we have is that we have this wonderful Dell product and tech stack that we can leverage to create most of these microservices. Now, Dell is a huge company. Different teams work in different ways, but this is something that we are experimenting with, and we think it's a great opportunity that we have being within Dell Technologies. So Nandini, with that, would you like to double click on the technology aspect of it and tell people how Spring and PCF in particular have made our lives easier?
Sure. Thanks, Malini. Sure. So now let us understand how we placed our third pillar and what did we do to make it strong enough. By now, we all know that Dell is undergoing a huge transformation state where it's transforming all its technologies and processes it uses to be more efficient than ever. And this direction has been set all the way from top. So we wanted to be aligned with our company goals while we were trying to achieve ours. So we wanted to choose a framework which would help achieve this. So what were our criteria? What were we looking for? First and foremost, what we were looking for in the framework was the capabilities to build different components of an e-commerce platform, like microservices, streams for real-time flows, batch processes, and a lot more. Secondly, we wanted something which was easily adaptable and quick to learn, because no doubt we were a bunch of smart people, but we were all from different technical backgrounds. Not to miss, test-driven development. We wanted everyone to imbibe test-driven development, which is one of our major essence. But then, that was a great challenge for us, because test-driven development has been a nightmare for the developers coming from a world of traditional way of working. So, I think you can guess who was able to check all the boxes for us. Yes, Spring turned out to be the one, for obvious reasons. After a lot of discussions and considerations, we chose Spring due to various reasons like ease of use, versatile modules, consistency, and great testing support. The bonus was that Spring tied back with our process of lean principles and methodologies very well. Due to this, we were able to achieve short and quick iterations, and we were in production in just about a month. So now let us see how Spring connected the dots for us. Let me ask a question here. Can someone in the room tell me a one-liner for design pattern? Like just in simple word, what it means? Anyone?
Maybe you could tell us.
Okay, how I would put it in my words in just plain English. It's the best way to solve a recurring problem. We all face different kinds of problem every day. Some are common, some are not, and there are multiple ways to solve them. But the best way is only one. Just like we can walk on the road the way we want to, no? But still we follow certain rules and guidelines. Why so? Because those traffic rules have been found the best and safest for everyone. Similarly, in our world, we follow Spring concept of sensible defaults, which is already a proven solution and it is freely available. And it worked out best for most of our use cases. So now let us deep dive into our use cases. To begin with, I'll tell you about the first microservices that we built using Spring. So we were trying to build an API which would return a filtered set of results based on certain input parameters provided by the application consuming the API. But the challenge was to do this, we needed to ingest the from a traditional SQL database to a relationship-based graph database. Graph database was altogether a new concept for all of us, and it came with its own challenges like complex cipher queries and a completely different data model. But Spring Data helped us to abstract those complexities by providing a great support for our underlying database, Neo4j. We actually got an added benefit here. Now, say if we have to move to a different database altogether tomorrow due to any reason, we have that flexibility due to Spring Data. All that is needed is just minimal change in the functional layer. Now, when we had built our skeletal API, we wanted to ingest the real-time database changes. For that, we could have written our own ETL flow. But then that would also mean maintaining tons and tons of code. We didn't want to get into that. So we decided to choose a pipeline framework for that. And we did multiple comparisons between Mule, Apache Camel, and Spring Cloud Dataflow. SCDF turned out to be the winner because of obvious reasons like its architecture, fault tolerance, PCF readiness, ease of use, the scalability, and cloud native support, and many more. SCDF also helped us in converting our existing transformer application into the processor app. And by just adding the starter apps for the source and sink, our pipeline was ready in no time. Just to give you a sense of the details we went into to finalize this framework, this was the comparison done between the frameworks and how we finalized onto SCDF. Now, moving back to the example of our cars. We all like cars, but then we have our own preferences with the brand. Mercedes is different from Audi, and Audi is different from Porsche, and so on. Why? Because of the customization they use. Similarly, all our applications are different from each other, and their configurations are different. And they have their own customization. We really don't want to get into that customization. So when we were going cloud native, we chose Spring Cloud to automate these SaaS patterns for us. We didn't want to control, coordinate, and debug the configurations, messaging options, load balancing, routing, etc. So one of the immediate benefits what we saw using Spring Cloud was the config server, which is part of Spring Cloud, helped us externalize our configurable properties from the applications. After that, whenever we had to change any property for any environment for our CI/CD pipeline, we really didn't have to go to each application level. All that was needed was just to change those configurations at the config server module only. Now, at the heart of all these was Spring Boot. All these applications, what we built, leveraged the power of Spring Boot. We also took advantage of other Spring modules like security for authentication and authorization, monitoring and testing. We wrote our unit and integration tests using one single framework. And we could also leverage its mocking capabilities. So this was about our Spring story. Now, let's have a look at the PAAS story.
You want me to take a stab at it?
Sure.
Okay, great. So, how many here are developers? Okay, great. So, I'm assuming you enjoy writing good code, which eventually end up like being turned into like great features, right? Now, how many of you really enjoy setting up the plumbing for it? How many of you love procuring your servers and creating your VMs, setting up networking, and all such fun stuff? Yeah. Not so many. Yeah, well. Our developers, not different at all, right? So all they want to do is write super awesome code, create super awesome features, and have super awesome products being sent out to the market. So what did we need? We needed a platform that would do all the plumbing for us. Again, being in Dell Technologies, Pivotal Cloud Foundry was our default choice to begin with. But as we started using Pivotal Cloud Foundry, right, we figured out that it provided all the benefits that we could ask for in our applications. Now, one conscious decision that we made was to make sure that all the applications that we built would be bound to the platform, and it would be agnostic to the infrastructure underneath. So as we had seen in an earlier slide that we have a wonderful Dell tech stack which can enable us to run the entire microservices in a Dell on Dell stack. If for any reason we have to use an infrastructure underneath the platform which is different for any reason, our applications would not have to worry about that. That proved to be really valuable. It kind of gave us that sense of liberation that developers could concentrate on creating business value, write your applications in such a way that your infrastructure kind of becomes immaterial. So this is how we kind of made sure that the PAAS side of things enabled our developers to work quickly and work to the best of their ability. Now I'd like to give you an example where, so SCDF is something that Nandini had touched upon earlier, right? How SCDF solved our problems. But there was an example when we tried to run SCDF on PCF, which not only showed us that SCDF indeed is a great product, but it also showed us how important it is to be in a community which supports the consumers. So what happened there was, initially we started with SCDF installed locally, worked great, but quickly we realized that that won't scale. So there was a story where developers had, two developers kind of put their heads together. They just had to use the SCDF service on PCF and get things working. Strangely, they couldn't get it to work. They spent quite some time. Initially, they thought they were missing something, spent a fair bit of time trying to figure things out, but it just wouldn't work. Googling, going through tech forums, all pointed to the fact that it should work. So we quickly realized that there was something wrong. So what we did was we raised a ticket with Pivotal, and the Pivotal folks were beyond delightful. Immediately, they started triaging the issue, and it was identified as a regression introduced in the particular release that we were trying out, which was, the issue had basically popped up in their product probably just recently. So they knew how to fix it, and they knew that the fix would come up in the next release. But what we loved was, in the meanwhile, before we could actually get our hands onto the release, they actually gave us a manual workaround as well. So our developers loved that. They didn't have to worry about the release cycles. They didn't have to worry about when the product would actually come into market. We could just get unblocked and start working. So as I said, this basically strengthened our belief that we had chosen to be in the right community of people and we had chosen the right products. And we could just focus on what is most important. That is delivering business value. And the rest was kind of taken care of. So yeah, this is pretty much what I had from the PAAS side of things. I would like to deep dive and answer all your questions if you have any at the end. But Nandini, do you think it's a good time to segue into the learnings and tips that we wanted to share?
Sure, I think so.
Awesome.
So now, I think you would have realized we did a lot of POCs and spikes in our initial days, right? So I believe the effort was well worth the time because it saved us from developing new features which were not really required. To give you a couple of examples, uh, remember I mentioned about creation of the SCDF pipeline in Jiffy? Actually, in the initial time, we thought that we would write the whole processor application from scratch. But when we were doing the short POC to understand the working of SCDF, see how it works in and out, we realized that our existing transformer code can be reused here, and we did that. Also, whenever it came to choose a database, we used to look at the advantages and disadvantages of different options available and see which one fits our use case. Also, while I was discussing about our success stories, I mentioned that we went in production in around a month. To be honest, we could have done a much better job there. When things go to production, it might behave in an unexpected way. I guess most of you would agree to that, right? Everyone would have experienced that. So instead of waiting for all the dependent components to be deployed, we could have deployed our applications independently as soon as they were available. If we do so, it actually gives us time to see the behavior of that application in the production environment and even fix the issues, if any. Now, talking about Spring. Spring, being a framework, does a lot of stuff to which we do not have visibility. And actually, that makes sense as well. That is somewhat required to make it simple for its consumers. But then this abstraction sometimes restricts the developers to affect the behavior using limited set of hooks only. If you were there in yesterday's session from Dave Sire, you must have heard the same. So this abstraction also makes debugging tricky sometimes. I'm sure all the developers here will have their own experiences related to these. Similarly, I have one. So we had written a custom class for some functionality, and we instantiated the bean for that using some custom properties. When we ran our application, guess what? It was not working as expected. Malini, you remember how much we struggled to fix that small issue?
I do.
So what happened was, so to figure that out, we actually opened our debugger and looked at the state of each of the bean and see what was going on. That's when we figured out that the custom properties, what we had set, were not really available. And it was just a normal bean. And we realized that there was an auto-wired bean with the same name sitting somewhere in the application, which overrode our custom bean. It was not clearly visible. But after debugging for a while and spending some time, we figured that out. Obviously, we fixed that, but then we saw the trade-off. Spring took us some extra time, but then we got to learn about some debugging tips and some new Spring features as well. Now, talking about Spring extensibility. We all know that Spring is an opinionated framework, but still it's open for a lot of customization. Like, we leveraged Spring data to a great extent. But then there was a time when we had to write our own custom queries so that we wanted to filter the data at the database level based on some user-specific inputs. At that point of time, we had to undergo cipher learning, but then, yeah, that was it. We could write our own custom queries in the repository class. We didn't have to change the entire framework for that. Mentioning again, we got a great community support. SCDF being a completely new framework for all of us, we were actually struggling with the component and integration testing for that in our initial stage. We tried a lot of stuff, actually. We tried Googling, a lot of researching, but we just couldn't get it working. That's when we realized that our support was just a call away. We connected to the SCDF PM from Pivotal, and we got really good pointers on how to proceed, and we were unblocked immediately. Malini already shared another example of the help we got. So what we saw was that the consumers have a great say in the community. And we learned that if consumers reach out to the community for new features, they can actually contribute and drive the future development of the community. Because their requirement or problems today can be someone else's requirement or problem tomorrow. Another last thing which I would like to mention is PCF is a very powerful framework, and it has a lot of rich marketplace offerings and a lot of the features. We should try to make the best potential use of that. But to do that, we should be aware of what exact features we are looking for from the framework. So we should understand that first, and then also inform our ops team for that, so that they can set up the framework for us in a way where we can utilize its potential to the fullest. At the end, I would like to say that this is just the beginning of our journey towards a greater transformation. There's still a lot to do and a lot to learn in the near future. Thank you.